Seth Dillon of the Babylon Bee stuns Joe Rogan into silence on abortion. We're going to analyze their debate as a textbook example of persuasion. We're going to see how the lamestream media is actually trying to gaslight it and spin it. And make sure to stick with me at the very end of this video when I'll show you precisely why Seth Dillon left Joe Rogan utterly speechless. You are not going to want to miss this. Hey, gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, your patron professor, helping to think better so you can feel better in these crazy and turbulent times. So make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let's dive right in.
You don't have the right to tell my 14-year-old daughter she has to carry her rapist baby. You understand that?
To look that woman in the eye who was the born
listen,
of a rape.
Do you understand that? That's a 14-year-old child. If a 14-year-old child gets raped, you say that they have to carry that baby?
All right, let's stop here because this is perhaps the single most fallacious argument that's infected the discourse surrounding the issue of abortion, and yet it's probably the single most common tactic among those to try to defend abortions. Now, first and foremost, Rogan is making what's called a category error in logic. It's technically known as equivocation, in that in defending abortion in general, he's confusing two fundamentally different types of pregnancies. It's essential that we understand the distinction between voluntary pregnancies, which statistically account for 98% of all pregnancies, and involuntary pregnancies, which account for no more than 2%. Now, in fairness to Rogan, the majority of Americans favor exempting involuntary pregnancies from abortion bans. But logically speaking, what may be true of involuntary pregnancies is not necessarily true for voluntary pregnancies, precisely because they are indeed apples and oranges. They are two fundamentally different types of pregnancies. So Rogan's argument, as stated, doesn't work. You can't justify all abortions without exception by appealing to the exception. I'll say that again. You can't justify all abortions without exception by appealing to the exceptions. It's also known as the fallacy of composition, which assumes that what's true of the part is also true of the whole. Again, we can demonstrate this very easily. Just say to the abortion advocate, fine, I will join you in advocating for a total reproductive freedom when it comes to all forced pregnancies, involuntary pregnancies. So then will you join me in calling for the banning of abortion when it comes to the other 98%? So let's see how Seth Dillon answered Rogan.
I don't think two wrongs make a right. I don't think
That's
murder.
not- I don't think that's
murder is
wrong.
an answer to. I don't think murder fixes a rape.
What if we're talking about an abortion when the fetus, literally it's like 6 weeks, 4 weeks, 3 days? What if she just turned positive just now? Positive for pregnancy.
I just disagree that.
What if it just happened
that
today?
You can like draw a line on when.
You can't.
Like, once
So
life
you
has
can't
begun,
do
I don't
at
think you
the
draw
very
lines.
moment.
I would lay it out like this. I would say, it is wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human life. Abortion intentionally kills an innocent human life. Therefore, abortion is wrong. And I don't think any of the examples of like, oh well, how developed is it? You know, can it think? Is it conscious? Can it dream? Can it feel pain?
So for you, it's the moment of conception.
I think that if it's a human life, a distinct human life, then I think it's wrong to end its life.
All right, so Seth is going all the way here, okay? And yet he has some pretty sound logic. And interestingly, some pretty significant scientific studies on his side. A recent doctoral dissertation written by University of Chicago student Stephen Jacobs found that among over 5,000 biologists interviewed regarding their opinion on when human life begins, 95% of those 5,000 biologists agreed that life begins at conception. And it was an astonishing study because 63% of these biologists sampled consider themselves non-religious. A full 89% claimed to be politically liberal. Only 11% identified themselves as conservative. 92% of them were registered Democrats. And yet, despite that overwhelmingly left-wing profile, they were almost unanimous, 95%, recognizing that human life begins at the very moment of fertilization, the moment a human zygote is formed in the womb. In other words, biologically speaking, the only difference between a human zygote from the moment of conception and, say, a 95-year-old adult is food, air, water, and time. There is no new specified biological information added to the zygote from the moment of conception. So Seth has some pretty impressive scientific evidence backing his position, and he draws out the logical implications of that. If it's always wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human life, and if abortion intentionally kills an innocent human life, then by definition, abortion is always wrong, regardless of the stage of development that the human life is going through at the time. So we've got Rogan pushing a fallacy to defend abortion, and we've got Seth Dillon responding to that fallacy with a counterposition backed by evidential and logical precision.
And
so you think that
even,
once the conception happens, there's some sort of a miraculous event, like at the very moment, like you could literally get to the point where the sperm cracks the egg. If you could scoop that egg out right there, would that be abortion?
Well, I mean, at some point you're going to have to say there was a magic moment that happened, because you believe that we eventually become valuable humans, right?
Well, listen,
where's the moment where you think the magic happened? When we start talking about harmful misinformation and the types of things that are considered, like that I say or that we tweet or the jokes that we make that are considered harmful misinformation, I'm like, well, what about calling that baby a clump of cells? I think that's harmful misinformation, because then you're encouraging people to kill it like it's nothing when it's actually a human life. It's a developing human life. I think abortion is healthcare the way that rape is lovemaking. If we want to use rape as an example, I think they're opposites, and it's like these are euphemisms that we use. You know, we use the word healthcare. We're talking about a procedure that ends an innocent human life, and we're calling it healthcare. That's like calling rape lovemaking.
And this is why it's such a human issue, because I see what you're saying.
Now, that was fascinating. That was a fascinating exchange, because if you notice what Dillon did there is he brought up a point that's all too familiar for Joe Rogan, and that's being the subject of supposed disinformation, right? That's a very, very interesting rhetorical move on Seth's part, because he's now framing the abortion debate in terms that Rogan has himself been the frequent victim of, which of course is a supposed penchant for misinformation. And what Seth is doing here is he's helping Joe relate better to the pro-life position by inviting him to see it from very familiar frames of reference, which of course is social media's selective censoring of disinformation. What Seth is helping Rogan see here is that if Seth's argument holds water, if human life really does begin at conception, then running around claiming that a fetus is just a clump of cells in order to justify terminating it is the epitome of disinformation, and yet the powers that be among our social media oligarchs don't seem to care in the least. So this is an excellent example of how Seth helps Rogan familiarize himself with the pro-life position. And then he goes all the way with it. Seth enters into the realm of the redefinition of words, which is precisely what Joe Rogan was just ripping Biden over in his redefinition of the word recession. How do you call the intentional killing of a human life healthcare? And that really seemed to hit Joe Rogan.
Life is valuable. Like, yes, and people have almost were the victims of abortion, and they weren't. They went on to become these amazing people, and we would have lost them.
Sometimes it's a failed abortion. Like, there's people who've survived like a saline abortion, and they're damaged as a result of it, but they lived, and now they're born. They usually go on, ironically enough, to become pro-life activists.
Oh, well, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's wild. But it makes sense. I mean, if that's what made you, wouldn't you be a pro-life activist?
Probably would be.
I don't know. What do you think? Did we just see Joe Rogan flip on his pro-abortion stance? Well, not according to the legacy media. Look at this from CNN. Joe Rogan fires back at conservative commentator over abortion. Or this run from Newsweek. Joe Rogan brings up his daughter to shut down guest in abortion debate. Oh, really? Is that what happened? Fake news, gang, knows no boundaries, and it's certainly not going to show you what we just saw together. That was a masterclass in sound reasoning and persuasion coming from the Babylon Bee's Seth Dillon. And it is a textbook example of how to cordially and dialogically engage with someone of a different persuasion. As you can see for yourself, it was Joe Rogan who was the one in awe of Seth's argument, to which we all say, well done, Seth. Well done. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button, and definitely check out my latest video on Jordan Peterson, leaving Joe Rogan speechless on the Bible. You're not going to want to miss that. So make sure to click on the link, and I'll see you over there. God bless.